Robby, what's on your radar?
I'm going to really shock you with this one. A radar about mask mandates, which continue to outrage me, but support for them is collapsing among previously mask militant Democrats and public health officials. Hooray! California Governor Gavin Newsom is ending the state's strict indoor mask mandate next week, and New Jersey and Connecticut will no longer require masks in schools. Leanna Wen, a medical analyst for CNN who has flirted with some truly dystopian policies concerning the stigmatization of the unvaccinated, now sounds positively libertarian. This week she heralded the end of mandates as, quote, a needed shift from government-imposed requirement to individual decision. Let's watch.
You say we can start removing at least some coronavirus restrictions now. Tell us why.
Well, I agree with Colorado, with many other local and state jurisdictions that are beginning to lift government mandates. And I think this is the key. I'm not saying that we should be stopping masking, but rather that this needs to shift from a government requirement to an individual decision. The government can't keep on telling our citizens that this is a 5-alarm fire all the time. People are just going to start tuning it out and not pay attention. They'll be desensitized. And so what needs to happen is we need to end the state of emergency and preserve the ability of public health authorities to reinstitute mandates in the future if we see more dangerous variants later.
My words in her mouth. It's beautiful. I love to see it. Now, she claims that the science has changed, and that's why she's willing to go along with this. I don't agree with that. I think very little has actually changed in the last 6 months. The vaccines continue to be the only significant policy intervention to drastically prevent severe cases of COVID-19, except that many more people have caught it and recovered from coronavirus. Case numbers fluctuate as more contagious variants run wild through the population, with masks and other measures doing very little to deter them. But the vaccinated enjoy incredible protection. Still, Team Blue giving up on mask mandates, very welcome development. Not every member of the extremely cautious coalition has jumped ship just yet, however. American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten, whose significant influence over the Biden administration makes her the person solely most responsible for the education system's failures during the pandemic, well, she is still reluctant to let kids lose their masks. In an interview with MSNBC, she said she was theoretically in favor of a masking off-ramp, but only when, quote, the spread is so low enough that there's no dissemination or transmission in schools.
What Dr. McBride just told us about masks not particularly being effective for children, what's the argument against taking off masks in schools?
Well, the argument is that let me just say this. I am in favor of an off-ramp on masks.
Right.
The real issue becomes, is the spread low enough so that there's no dissemination or transmission in schools? And it's not the teachers transmitting to kids. It's more kids, particularly in elementary schools right now. And so the question really becomes, that's why I like what Massachusetts has done, because what they've said is that on a school-by-school basis, they said if there's 80% vaccination rates, then those schools can lift the mandates.
COVID-19 is not going away entirely anytime in the near future. There will always be the possibility of one student transmitting the disease to another. Vaccinated staff who catch COVID-19 are likely to experience a mild bout. The students themselves will probably suffer mild cases whether they're vaccinated or not. Healthy young people are at little risk of severe illness, and whether they choose to get vaccinated is really no one's business but theirs. Nevertheless, Weingarten was only willing to commit to a demasking policy in schools where the vaccination rate is at least 80%. That's what she said. This is overly cautious. Schools can certainly let students take off their masks, even if the vaccination rate among kids and teens is lower than that. In any case, there's little reason to think that compulsory masking is making a significant difference in schools, contrary to the CDC's sloppy reporting on this subject. Indeed, one of MSNBC's other guests, Dr. Lucy McBride, said mask mandates are doing more harm than good. Quote, there's no convincing evidence in the real world that masking children in schools makes a significant difference in transmission in schools. That's what she said. Watch this.
And here's the plain truth, is that there's no convincing evidence in the real world that masking children in schools makes a significant difference in transmission in schools. We also know right now that everyone over the age of 5 has widespread ability to get vaccinated, that vaccines are the way to take the claws and the fangs away from the virus and turn it into a more manageable disease, that kids face a much lower risk from COVID than adults do. And with Omicron receding, in a patchwork fashion around the country, it's really time to start lifting mitigations whose benefits are unclear at best and whose harms are mounting. We have seen, as you know, that the AAP and the Surgeon General have declared a mental health emergency for teens and children in this country. We cannot wait longer to think about lifting restrictions that are causing more harm than doing good. We need to have these restrictions in place at some point now down the road. We may need them. Right now is the time to really balance the risks of the COVID disease itself against the harms of the mitigations.
Amen. Many young people have gone 2 years without regularly seeing the faces of their teachers and their classmates. Now, when Weingarten is speaking and needs to be heard, she understands that it's better to remove her mask. Look at this photo. That's her at a conference recently, the other day. She tweeted this. Now, why would it be any different in the classroom? When people want to be understood, they take down their masks. Being understood, being heard, kind of important in the classroom. And now there's some new news. Ryan, I was very disappointed to hear this. Rochelle Walensky is urging do not drop mask mandates from schools yet. She said this in an interview yesterday, which I think is just wildly too cautious. But
yeah, like I sent my kids to school this morning in masks. For what?
Yeah.
For what at this point?
You would think if like an alien or vaccinated, a time traveler was visiting our country and just was looking at the policies in place, they'd say, oh, this disease must be uniquely deadly for children. That's what they would think based on the policies.
Because you've got adults going around without masks.
Right, we're not masked. We could go to a restaurant. We'd have to wear a mask while we walked from the door to the table, but then we'd sit down. We could sit, eat, drink, not be masked. All sorts of environment. In the office place, you don't have to be masked unless the office has that policy, I think. But at school, the kids, they're still eating bites of food in between pulling the mask down.
Yeah, the kids have less power in society, and they're the ones that are
right. They don't have a union representing their interests. It's very clear the teachers' union represents the interests of the teachers. We're not asking teachers to put their lives at risk greatly. They are vaccinated. They can get vaccinated. Omicron is milder anyway. It's very mild if you're vaccinated, and also they can wear masks if she's worried about certain teachers who are old. Like you can wear the really heavy duty mask. You can wear a face shield. You can take that precaution for yourself. It's just so cruel to demand that all kids do it. Some might not want to. Some might have difficulty with it. Some might not be able to hear, or they might have trouble, socializing and learning because of it. And we're still doing it. Doing it.
And the conversation should really be about the science, as in the clip that you played of the person who laid out
Lucy McBride.
Lucy McBride, who said, look, there isn't actually a lot of convincing evidence that this is effective in stopping the spread and in reducing transmission in schools and in communities. There are, of course, some studies that you can point to that will have some marginal moves in one direction or another, but what she means is that it's not very persuasive. It's not very convincing compared to the cost of the intervention.
Yeah, and it's, I can't believe I'm saying this, it's like Dr. Wen was saying, she's right about this. Again, this is very strange times now, when she's saying that, if there emerged a variant that it was much more deadly, that was really making children really sick, you might have to, the government might want to reintroduce mitigation measures, but you have to not have them then, or now in the situation where it's not that bad, in order to have enough social will or buy-in to the idea that there would be a situation where it would be required. Because if we're all just going to go, no, we don't want to bring this stuff back, because of how reluctant they were to relax them in the situation where they could have relaxed.
Now, if you were a true revolutionary libertarian, you'd be for heightening the contradictions. You'd be for that.
This is the shock my version of the shock doctrine. No, I'm not.
You'd be for the most absurd restrictions and mandates
in order to
completely discredit them in the future.
Yeah, I just don't see that working. I do believe
reformist libertarian.
I am an extreme libertarian. We should legalize heroin. Let's do it right now. But no, not that way. Not at that cost.
All right, that's my consulting career for the libertarian revolutionary movement is now over.
Well, the libertarian revolutionary movement is not beyond taking your advice. Nothing's worked out yet, so maybe your strategy would be the right one.
Anyway,
more rising after this. We'll have your radar coming up next.
There we go.